I wasn't ready. All right, so hello, thank you for coming. Can you all hear me? Okay. A few years ago, I had a literary escort who took me around to these kinds of things, to make sure I got here on time, that kind of stuff. And after 2 or 3 of these, he took me aside and said, "You have a problem. I hope you don't mind me telling you, but you write very dark stuff, a lot of murder, a lot of bloodshed, and at these events, you're up there and you're smiling all the time, and that's not what people want from you. They want to be scared, they want you to be brooding and solemn." So I didn't take his advice. I'm sorry to let you down. I've never been scary in my life. So with that, all right. Has anyone here read Red Rabbit? Oh, quite a few of you. All right, well, thank you. If you have read it and you liked it, this is a sequel. If you haven't read it or you didn't like it, this is completely different. It's a standalone book. Red Rabbit was about found family and identity, which I write about a lot. But this is more about, Rose of Jericho is more about love and grief and death and how those things are kind of intertwined and how we deal with those things as human beings. So it was a little bit of a departure for me. It was a departure in a lot of ways for me, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But I thought I'd read to you a little bit and then talk about what happens after what I read and what the book's about. And then read to you a little bit more, just a little bit. I've timed it, and those 2 sections are only about 6 minutes, so you don't have to listen to me for too long. And then I think, I've never done this before, but I want to read a little bit, just a tiny bit, from my next thing that's coming out next year, just to see how it goes. It's not even been edited yet, so any problems with it are entirely mine. And then I'm going to open it up to Q&As. I know a lot of authors don't like Q&As, but I love them. So I like to know, I write books to connect and communicate with readers, and I want to know more about you, so the Q&A is great, because here we get to connect and communicate. So please, feel free to tune me out while I'm reading, and try to think of a good question for me. All right, let's see how this goes. It's only my second time reading this out loud, so I'm going to stumble a lot, plus I'm drunk, so let's see. All right. Ready? No, I'm not. Katie died on a gray day in February, 2 minutes after the death of her premature child. At the moment his wife drew her last shuddering breath, Moses heard the jangling of spurs and saw a dark figure from the corner of his eye. When he turned his head, there was no one there. That night he buried his wife and child behind the farmhouse, breaking through the frozen soil with a hatchet and fashioning markers for their graves from planks he pulled off his wagon. You can tell I've only read this one. The following morning, before the sun rose, he set out after death. The Grim Reaper had a head start on him, but Moses had a fast horse and a broken heart. It had snowed for the better part of a week, and Death's mount had left a trail of deep hoof prints. Moses had no trouble following them. For 5 days and 5 nights he rode, and he observed that Death had stopped many times ahead of him. Moses saw men digging fresh graves in distant fields, but he pushed his horse onward, determined to catch the villain who had taken his wife. He came upon Death on the morning of the 6th day. Fog had settled in a shallow valley between 2 limestone ridges, where the first rays of sunshine couldn't reach. Death was squatting beside a small campfire, rubbing his hands together and staring into the flames. A pale horse stood nearby, tethered to the trunk of a bare elm. Death looked up as Moses approached. "Come, friend," Death said. "Warm yourself by my fire." Moses drew his pistol and shot Death through the eye. The Grim Reaper fell without a word and rolled into the campfire, stirring up a shower of sparks. Having murdered the angel of death in cold blood, Moses thought he ought to feel something, triumph or regret or fear. The fire warmed his face, and a cold breeze tickled the back of his neck, but all he felt was a hollowness in his chest. There was no reason to go forward, and there was nothing to go back to except an empty farmhouse that had been painted cornflower blue in happier times. He checked his pistol and saw that it still held 4 bullets. He set the muzzle against his forehead and pulled the trigger. He heard a click as the hammer struck, and the muzzle jerked against his skull, but there was no flash of light, no instant of pain, no sharp drop into oblivion. Confused, he cracked the pistol open and checked the chamber again. It held 3 bullets in a spent casing. "Strange," he said to Death's corpse. After a while, he stood and approached the pale horse. He untethered it and removed Death's saddle and bags, heaving them into the fire, where the old leather smoked and sputtered. He slapped the horse on its flank and watched it gallop away. He fetched a short-handled shovel from his gear and broke through the crust of ice, then dug a trench and buried the body. It was hard work. Death was big-boned and heavy, and the snow was deep. When he had finished, Moses scattered dirty snow over the campfire and stowed his shovel. Then he mounted his old Appaloosa and rode away. That is pretty much how the book begins. There's a little bit before that. So Moses has killed Death. There's no death anymore. And that means that everybody in the world just stops dying. The dead don't come back to life, but nobody can lay down and just die. The problem is, without being able to die, without finishing the cycle of life, people get agitated, they get restless. And tempers flare and people's personalities start to change. They're not full-on zombies, I promise, but it's about sort of anger taking over people, the angry side of people's personalities. So Moses realizes he's made a terrible mistake, and he doesn't know what to do about it. So he sets out to find 2 witches he knows in hopes that they can help him rectify his mistake. And those witches have settled with a friend of theirs in a New England village called Ascension. And they've moved into a very, very haunted house. There's a lot of ghosts in this book. And so this book kind of goes back and forth between Moses' journey to find Sadie and Rabbit and what they're doing in this village with their haunted house and their superstitious villagers. So I'm going to skip ahead to that, a little bit of that, if you don't mind. The first part was a little rocky, but not too bad. Yeah. "There's Benjamin," Rabbit said. She pointed to a distant figure sliding along a path beside the main road. Benjamin stopped and turned, and when he saw them in front of the drugstore, he waved and hollered, but his words wafted away with his breath. Rabbit shook her head to indicate she hadn't heard him, and he cupped his gloved hands around his mouth to shout again. Again, his words faded away, and again Rabbit shook her head. Benjamin spread his arms out and shrugged his shoulders in exasperation, then hopped over a snowbank toward them. An old swayback mare, pulling a dog cart that sagged under the weight of empty milk bottles, brushed against him, knocking him to the ground, and the wheels of the wagon rolled over his body. Crates of milk bottles toppled over the sides of the wagon and crashed into the street. Benjamin's screams and the meaty crack of his ribs carried across the square over the sounds of breaking bottles and the squealing, frightened horse. By the time the first set of wheels had thumped over Benjamin's body, Sadie was already running across the green, and Rabbit followed her mother, windmilling her arms to keep her feet from skidding out beneath her. Sadie's long legs carried her farther and faster than Rabbit could manage, and by the time Rabbit reached the scene of the accident, a small crowd of onlookers was already gathering. Sadie helped Benjamin to his feet. "I feel fine," he said. "Really, it surprised me, that's all." But it was obvious that he wasn't fine. His clothing was soaked with blood, and there was a spreading pool of it beneath him. His left arm hung limp at his side, bent at an angle that made Rabbit's stomach turn. She could see pink flesh and white bone where his jacket had been torn open, and behind his ribs a blue-gray organ pumped slowly, then still more slowly. Then it stopped pumping altogether. "Your heart stopped beating," Rabbit whispered. Benjamin looked down in surprise and pulled the tattered remnants of his jacket across his chest. Sadie took off her heavy coat and draped it over his shoulders. "Is there a doctor in the village?" she asked. "I don't need a damn doctor," Benjamin said. "I feel fine, I really do." Rabbit had no idea what he must really be thinking or feeling. She hadn't realized it was possible for someone to think and feel once their heart had stopped beating. All right. So, I apologize if that was too gruesome for the baby. So this book, I was kind of stupid. Red Rabbit hadn't come out when I started writing this book, so I had no idea if anybody would like Red Rabbit, if they would want to read more set in that world. But I really wanted to write more set in that world, so I did the stupid thing and went ahead and started writing it. And I'm glad I did, but it was a different process than I'm used to. I don't outline my books. I write things just by the seat of my pants. And this book actually started, the first sentence was originally, Moses had a vast horse and a broken heart. My agent, and I just went on from there not knowing what was going to happen, or what the book was about. And my agent read it and said, I don't know why Moses killed Death. I don't know why he's doing any of these things. And I said, his wife died, that's why. And he was like, oh, I don't feel it. So I didn't ask him how his marriage was going, but I thought about it and I realized maybe we needed a little more investment. So I went back and wrote a new first chunk that talks about their relationship some, and explores that a little bit. So my first sentence got buried farther into the book. But I kept writing from the Vast Horse and Broken Heart, and killed a lot of people as I went along. And usually, when I get to about the 2/3 spot in a story or a book, I know what's going to happen. I finally know the ending, and I start working toward that. This time, that didn't happen. I didn't know how this thing was going to end, and I started to panic. So I did something I've never done before, and hopefully never do again. But I took each scene in the book and distilled it to a sentence or two. And then I printed that out, and I cut the sentences into strips and laid them all on the table in the bedroom because I was the only table that didn't have books and stuff piled on it. And I moved all the little strips around. And I took out some strips, some scenes, and wrote new scenes on little blank strips and stuck them in other places, and then went back and rewrote the book with a whole different structure. And I was pretty happy with that. I got 2/3 of the way through, and it didn't help. I didn't know where I was going. So I did it again. It took me months. And eventually, I figured out the structure of this book. Originally, it was Moses' journey. It was Sadie and Rabbit in Ascension. And then they were separate, and then at the end, they came together. And so here, they go back and forth. And I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out, but it was some kind of combination of outlining and not outlining, which I don't recommend if you're a writer. But pick one or the other. Don't do them both. So yeah, I'm happy with it. I hope you're happy with it. And now, if it's okay, going to read a little snippet of a book that's coming out next year called The Boatman. I'm very happy with it, but I'm going to tell you what it's about, and you're going to think it's ridiculous. Most of my stuff, if I tell you what it's about, it sounds ridiculous. All right. It's about a cruise ship of elderly people who see death following them in a rowboat on the ocean, and he's keeping up with the cruise ship. He's not following behind, and so they try to outrun him. So let's see how this goes. Haven't read this out loud. Captain Billy Prescott felt a tingling sensation in his left hand, followed by a shooting pain that traveled up his arm and made his scalp itch. He paged the infirmary, and when there was no response, he sent the quartermaster to find Dr. Kobazuski. I actually pronounced that. I thought I'd stumble over that. But Vincent Kobazuski was in the engine room talking to the electrical engineer, and the quartermaster didn't think to look for him there. Captain Billy was hunched over a control panel when Safety Officer Amanda George entered the wheelhouse. She was too preoccupied to notice his discomfort. "Captain," Amanda said, "there's something in the water behind us." Billy said nothing. I wouldn't mention it, but well, sir, it's really strange," she said. Billy's vision began to blur. "You're not going to believe me," Amanda said. "There's a man in a white suit, and he's standing in a rowboat in the middle of the ocean. He's rowing along with a pole, like a gondolier, and he's gaining on us." Billy moaned. "I swear," Amanda said, "I'm not making this up." For the first and only time in his life, Billy Prescott had an epiphany. He understood instinctively what was happening. With the last of his strength, he fell against the ship's con, and the Maria Calypso began to pick up speed. The security officer finally realized she had walked in on a private drama. "Captain, are you all right?" Billy straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath as the pain in his chest eased. "Get the gun from the safe," he said. "Shoot that thing out of the water." Dr. Vincent Kobazuski was on his way to the wheelhouse when he encountered the safety officer sitting in the aft stairwell, staring at his face and cradling a Smith & Wesson .357 in her lap. "Feels like we're gaining speed," Vincent said. "Any idea what's going on?" Amanda shook her head. "It doesn't make any sense, but there's a man out there in a rowboat, and Captain Billy told me to shoot him." The doctor sat down next to her. He folded his hands and watched her. "Maybe I was imagining things," Amanda said. "I mean, of course I was, right? But the captain didn't act like it." She took a breath. "I think you should evaluate us, Billy and me, to see if we're fit for duty." "I'll do that," Vincent said. "But first, let's go take a look at this man in a rowboat. If I see him too, that should tell us something about your mental acuity." They stood, and he followed her out onto the quarterdeck. He squinted at the bright water and shaded his eyes with his hands. He was only mildly surprised to see that there was indeed a small boat behind them. Vincent didn't consider Amanda George to be a fanciful person, and despite the strangeness of it, he hadn't truly doubted her story. "Glasses?" he said. She gave him her binoculars, and he focused them on the upright figure in the rowboat. It did appear to be a man wearing a clean white suit with a green tie and a white hat. But Vincent Kobazuski had spent his medical residency in the emergency room of Chicago's Mercy Hospital, and he had seen death in all its many forms. He dropped the binoculars, grabbed Amanda's revolver, and fired over the water at the man in the white suit. All right. Thank you. Totally different from Red Rabbit and Rose. All right. I gotta practice that one some more before I do this again. All right, so that is what I've got going, but I hope you have questions for me. Did you all tune me out and come up with questions? I hope. Anybody have anything? Nobody? I told you this is my favorite part.
I always have questions.
Okay.
Actually, I have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
But first, where Moses comes from,
Okay.
and like, how did you come up, or why did you decide to have him from Nicodemus,
Okay.
Kansas? And that there's not really any background on that particular location, even though it has some pretty significant
It does.
history.
Okay. Everybody heard her questions? Yeah, you've all heard of Nicodemus, Kansas, right? We all live in Kansas, and it's for those who haven't, it's a very small town. I think it's very, very small now. I don't think very many people live there anymore, but it was founded in, I think, the early 1860s, mostly by slaves, former slaves. So the population was almost entirely black. They took advantage of the Homestead Act, which allowed them to it was sort of a rent-to-own process. So they could work the land and eventually have their own homes, which at the time was a huge deal for them. So people came mostly from the South, but from all over for the chance to actually own their own homes and have their own land. And I live in Kansas. I presume most of you live in Kansas. And I've been to Nicodemus, and it's really inspiring to think about it, to see it. And Moses is black, and so I thought, what better, way to talk about Kansas than to have my black character be from Nicodemus. So he is, but I chose not to talk too much about the town. I mentioned a little bit in Red Rabbit too, partly because I did have more, but I cut it because it didn't move the story forward. And I hope that when I mention things, it inspires people to maybe look things up and learn on their own. That's how I always learned best, was learning on my own. So I didn't want to hit people over the head with a mallet if they weren't interested in that, and it stuck to the story. But yeah, it's a hugely inspiring place. Do look it up and learn about it if you don't already know. And your second question was?
My second question is,
I have a short memory.
Maybe it's more of a comment, but so this is my introduction to your writing. So this is my
okay.
first one. So I didn't know that it was a sequel.
Did it work?
I loved it.
Okay, good.
I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you.
And I thought it was hilarious.
Oh, you're talking about Frank
parts.
Smiley,
there's
right?
some really, really funny parts in there, and I couldn't help, maybe this says more about me than you, but so it makes me curious about your other writing too. But the mix of a little bit of the horror with humor, and all I could think about in a couple of the scenes was the Monty Python night. I'm not dead yet. I just didn't know if that was anywhere in your head.
Not on purpose, but yeah, Monty Python was huge for me when I was a kid. I was hugely influenced by Monty Python. I think most of my sense of humor comes from Monty Python. I think with any genre, horror or comedy or fantasy or anything, you have to leaven it with something else. So if every scene was just unrelenting death and bloody, hearts not beating anymore, I think it would get old. So to keep the pace going, I like to have some kind of humor. I try, at least in all my books, to have at least a character who lends himself to some kind of humor, to be made fun of or something. Frank Smiley in this book made me laugh while I was writing. So I love that guy, even though he's horrible. So yeah, thanks. The humor is on purpose, and it's hopefully it works. Yes. Oh, sorry. I should let you. You've got the microphone.
Sorry. First off, sorry for being late. Second off,
Thank you. I really needed that in my life.
Obviously, you are a mastercraft of horror and grotesque and all of these beautiful things. And in the last two books, really, this really nice, beautiful shift between this witchcraft and paranormal has been like surfacing, and I really enjoy the paranormal aspect of this book. I agree, I laughed. I actually cried a little bit, which was kind of weird. And I was like, what is wrong with me? I think I'm weirdly emotional or something. But I did, I found this one really humorous. And I laughed out loud, and my husband, you know, I don't read things that make you laugh. And he was like, what are you reading? And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, you're laughing? And I'm like, oh yeah, it was really funny. But overall, I just wanted to note that I loved that mix in this. There were a couple of references in here. I love that you do that. I love that you do lead people to look up things on their own. I love when authors do that because it gives that like outside research aspect for me. So I'm like, oh, I don't know what that is. I'll have to annotate that and come back and look to it. So I enjoyed that too. But particularly, that was very windy and sorry.
It's nice things you're saying about me.
Your like spiritual ghosty vibe that's coming or that came with this. Do you believe in ghosts, and have you had experiences with them, and is that kind of where this comes from?
Oh boy, I'm gonna come across as to the research part. I do so much research when I'm writing a book. That if I put it all in, it would be 4 times as long. So that's a big part of why a lot of it's cut. But okay, do I believe in ghosts? I don't know. I believe in something, I suppose. I have seen things that I can't really explain, but I don't know if they're ghosts or brain tumors or what they are. But there's a couple of ghosts in this book that are things I've seen. I shouldn't even say this, I'm on camera.
I can cut anything.
The letters I'll get. When I was a kid, there was a room that I wouldn't go into. When I was a little baby, I would start screaming anytime my parents tried to take me into that room, and they had a cat that wouldn't go into the room. And when I was a little bit older, when I would be put down for a nap in my parents' room, whenever I would be put down there, I would be afraid of the old lady because I would hear her footsteps on the stairs, and I would hide under the bed, and I could see a lady's ankles and shoes walk past the bed and go into the closet. My parents had a walk-in closet, and close the door and not come out. So I would hide under the bed whenever I had to sleep in there. Later on, I did see a headless black cat in a place I lived, so I put that in the book. And I saw an older lady with a locket that she would try to show me. So I don't know what those things are, but I decided to make them ghosts in my book. So there you go. Now, whatever reputation I had is ruined. I'm nutty. Anybody else? Oh, okay.
Don't give me a microphone.
I'll
come get it. I was just wondering, I really liked. Sorry, you can go. I really liked Scotland Jericho, and I wondered, how did you go from those to Red Rabbit? But maybe you just answered those.
Okay. I can give you the creative reason. Okay, she asked how I went from writing Victorian thrillers to writing ghost stories. The creative reason is I just wanted to. Doing a series for a long time, I had sort of just run out of steam on those. I wanted to do something different, and I didn't want to be pigeonholed because I have lots of different stories. The story about the cruise ship running away from death, that's been in my head for 20 years. I wanted to write that. I wanted to write all kinds of things, and I was afraid I wouldn't get to. So I pivoted. But the other thing is I moved. My previous publisher only published mysteries and thrillers. And so to publish Red Rabbit, I had to move to a different publisher. And so the question I always get is, will I write another Murder Squad book? And I've written most of the 6th Murder Squad book, but now I can't publish it because, this publisher only wants to publish my ghost stories.
Well, I love Red Rabbit.
Oh, thank
So
you,
happy
thank
to
you.
find it.
So there will at some point be another Murder Squad book, the last one, but I don't know when or where we'll see it. So, but thank you for loving it.
At what point in your life did your decision to be a writer stop being some sort of hobby and become a deep conviction, or was it something that you always had?
It was always a deep conviction. I am useless at everything else. I had no qualifications to do anything. So if this doesn't work out, I've got an application to Walmart filled out. Yeah, I've always had that conviction. But it takes a long time to get other people to see that. So it takes a lot of determination and perseverance. I didn't sell my first book until I was 40. And now I'm 85. But yeah, my first 3 books are still sitting in a drawer, unpublished, and they're crap. You have to work all the crap out before you can start doing good stuff. And I did that. I wrote short stories and sent them out. I wrote comic books and sent them out. I wrote songs and sent them out. I wrote everything I could think of and tried it on everybody I could think of until finally something did hit. So it's been a drive as long as I can remember. It just takes a long time to get there.
And then,
Yeah.
why would you say that you gravitate more towards kind of the darker, grotesque type themes to illustrate the things you're trying to say?
Did I mention I saw a headless black cat? Yeah, I don't know. I've always been drawn to darker stuff, even though I'm squeamish. I don't like to see blood or think about blood. My knees get all wiggly, but yeah, I do think about it. I think about death all the time. I think about darker things, and you gotta get them out somehow. It's either that or therapy, right? Anybody else? Don't want to ask me about the old lady with the locket? I can tell you about it.
I had a question, Alex, if
Oh,
no
yeah,
one else
all right.
has one, but please, audience, if you have one. Okay, so you kind of touched on this in the beginning, where this is a book about death and kind of acceptance with that. And I really liked how you talked about it and handled it. Was there something specific you were dealing with that you felt like you needed to write this book? Or was that just sort of the natural progression of these characters?
Oh, that's a good question. And weirdly, I hadn't even thought about it until just now. My mom died while I was writing this book, but I didn't know that for a week. Nobody told me or my sisters. So there was a lot of, I had been estranged from her for 30 years, but there was a lot of thinking about, our lives and our deaths and our legacies. Legacy is something I've always thought about a lot, and I used to think that my legacy was my books. And that was wrong. My legacy is my son. My legacy is my relationships, how I treat other people, whatever memory anybody here is going to have of me in the future. That's my legacy. And so exploring that in a book, I think, was really interesting for me, just to see what people mean to each other and why we have to die in order for that meaning to really hit home? A good question. You're gonna make me cry.
I'm going to cry hearing your answer now, having read the book. That hits really hard, so read the book if you haven't yet. Any other questions for Alex today? Okay, well, let's all give Alex a round of applause. Thank you for being here.
Thank you all for coming in.
So we are going to have Alex signing books. He's going to move right over to this black table here. So we're going to form a line right on this side if you'd like to get your books signed. We also still have books for sale, all of Rose of Jericho and Backlist if you would like them. So
Go buy them all.
buy them all. Alex is also going to have a sign on his table with the QR code for his newsletter, so please sign up for that as well.
Settle in.
Everybody have a great